Welcome to Pensari Basketball. My name is Robert, and today we're going to talk about why your favorite high school mixtape legend didn't make it in the pros, why that dominant college player who led his team to the Final Four couldn't quite crack an NBA rotation, and why some players, when they level up, develop that dreaded bust tag. So grab a coffee and let's get to it. Look, if you're like most basketball fans, you've fallen in love with a 15, 16-year-old mixtape and you've thought, wow, the handle, the hops, this guy's going to be legit in 5 years. Flash forward 5 years, he's either not in the NBA, in Europe, at the end of an NBA rotation, barely clinging on to his NBA life, and you're wondering, what the hell happened to this guy? He was so good, right? Because there is a baked-in assumption that being good at one level somehow transfers to being good at another level, because the same thing that you're doing at one level, i.e. playing basketball, is the same thing you're doing at the next level, playing basketball. Now, if you're Shannon Sharp, Skip Bayless, these hot take people, Kendrick Perkins, you're going to tell the fans it's because this guy got lazy, didn't want it enough, wasn't good enough, he's a bust, right? Let me point to another handful of reasons why an athlete in high school may not make it in the pros. So I'm going to link a couple books in the description below. I highly advise anyone who's super curious about the science of performance to check those out. Let me know in the comments below also, is there an athlete that you thought was going to be super dominant who really felt like a massive disappointment to you that you were really invested in? Maybe there's an athlete you still are kind of holding out hope for. Are there any Marvin Bagley fans in the section? Let me know. So why does an athlete succeed ever? Well, let's put it this way. Space. Eddy Curry was dominant in high school because he created space. Vertical space, horizontal space. He was huge. He was a load. Go watch his high school mixtapes. He was enormous. What about Dujuan Wagner? Why was Dujuan Wagner so great in high school? I think he dropped like 100 plus points. Space. He was fast. He was big. He was strong. That's what creates space. It doesn't matter that he can't shoot that well. He doesn't need to shoot that well. So what happens when Dujuan Wagner goes up a level? Right? He struggles a little bit more than he struggled at the previous level. And then he ends up being drafted by the Cavs, I think 6th overall. And within a couple of years, no one's talking about Dujuan Wagner anymore. People are wondering, what happened to this guy? Andrea Bargnani, same thing, right? Dominant at one level, not really dominant, but good in the EuroLeague. Comes to the NBA, good rookie season, just falls off. So, and then there, of course, there are other guys who just never crack an NBA rotation, or there are guys like Adam Morrison where, you know, they're super dominant, best player in college basketball, comes into the NBA, can't crack 40% field goal percentage. After a couple of years, can't crack an NBA rotation, sitting at the end of the bench for the Lakers just a few years later. How the hell did that happen? Right? Did he get lazy? Right? Let's talk about it. So, first of all, I'm not dismissing the fact that certain players do get lazy. That actually does happen. I've seen it happen to a few people. It's definitely true. There are certain players who make it to the NBA and say, I have done everything in my life that I ever wanted to do, and I'm done with this. Okay? There's a second type of player who just can't deal with being a pro athlete. And that's a psychological thing that teams need to do a better job of working out. Okay? Either their social circle, their family, their friends, or their own mental makeup is simply not designed for the limelight. It's not designed for the pressures of being a pro athlete. Okay? And that might be what's happening with Ben Simmons right now. They can't deal with constant scrutiny. They can't deal with the discipline, the structure that comes with being an NBA athlete. They can't deal with the fanfare, the booze, all that stuff. Okay, I get that. There are a lot of players who have fizzled out and shrunken in the biggest moments because of that reason. Okay? But we're not here to talk about those reasons, because those reasons are there and they happen sporadically. But I am willing to bet that those are the minority. That the players who don't succeed, the vast majority of them are still trying to succeed. They simply can't. And to you at home wondering, how the hell is that even possible? This is more, player sympathizing. This is not player sympathizing. This is more of a clarification of what GMs get wrong. Now, earlier I mentioned that dominating in basketball is basically a domination of space. Okay? Shaquille O'Neal, Hakeem Olajuwon. It doesn't matter if you take up space through quickness, like Olajuwon did, and skill, or you take up space through sheer brute strength, like Shaq. It doesn't matter if you take up space like Allen Iverson and John Morant, sheer quickness. It doesn't matter if you take it up through vertical space and height like Yao Ming. Okay, if your release point is high enough and you're skilled enough, you're going to be really good in the NBA. But let's talk about how those advantages go away the more you level up, right? If I were to face a whole bunch of 7th graders, I would have advantages that I would not have against 11th graders. I couldn't do the same thing. But if I'm doing the wrong thing, look, I want to explain this so everyone can understand. There was always, I think we all knew that kid in grade 3 or grade 4 who was just smart. And he may have developed some pretty nasty work habits when it came to how he solved math problems, right? Maybe he always figured it out in his head. And the teachers would be like, you have to show your work. You have to show your work. And the kid was just like, no, miss, I do it in the head. I do it in my head. I'm smart. Okay. That same kid was flunking in grade 10. Almost always. Okay. Because he never developed the right process to get the results. Was just too focused on getting the results the quickest way possible. There are certain guys who are just too athletic to be bad high school players. They're way too athletic. They create way too much separation to be bad in high school. They're too big, too strong. They jump too high to be anything but dominant in high school, right? There are some guys in the NBA who are great regular season players. And then we call them chokers in the playoffs because they can't handle that increased attention to detail that happens when you actually scout players. They can't handle, and we talk about some guys who are really good in their rookie year, but then they fall off. Michael Carter-Williams, Tyreek Evans, there's a lot of guys who had pretty good rookie seasons and they just didn't get better. Is it they just stopped trying, or did the league maybe figure out what they do and they couldn't do anything else? Now, there's a story actually. Satnam Singh, some of you may know him, some of you may not. I believe he was drafted by the Dallas Mavericks some years ago. He's an Indian prospect. He was at IMG in Orlando. And this guy was in an interview, pre-draft interview with Daryl Morey of the Houston Rockets. And he was asked, who do you play like? Who do you pattern your game after? And he said Yao Ming and Shaq. And right then you knew that there's no chance that this guy's going to be successful. Now some of you might say, well, how the hell is that true? Well, let's talk about what I think GMs should look for if they don't want to draft a bust. Okay? Number 1, scalable skill sets. Okay? Things that actually scale up. There are guys who are quick for high school and quick for college, but that quickness advantage goes away. If 90% of their offense is generated through quickness and blowing past people, those advantages might disappear. I would look for self-awareness. I would ask a prospect seriously, what are your strengths and weaknesses? And I would ask them so that I could map it against what I believe their strengths and weaknesses are, what the box score and the scouts are telling me what their strengths and weaknesses are. And I would like to understand how self-aware this athlete is. Number 3, I would like to ask, how do you work? Not how much do you work, how do you work? Because 10,000 hours, 1,000 jump shots a day, these things don't mean anything if you're doing the work incorrectly. What I want to hear from an athlete is I have a trainer that is helping me understand where the weaknesses are in my game. My left hand, my floater, my pull-up game, my reads on defense, offense, whatever. Okay? The 4th thing that I would be looking for is playmaking. Playmaking is not just assists. Assists are sometimes a symptom of playmaking. But I would like to see in game time, how does an athlete read and react to situations? And this is why Yi Jianliang and guys like Kwame Brown, Eddy Curry, and guys like this went so high in the draft. The reason that these guys were eventually going to fail was not being tested. You weren't seeing it. It was like developing a giant blind spot. Because what did GMs do? They had these mammoth athletes. In the case of Yi, it's a guy who's like 6'11", he can shoot, he's, and everyone's looking for the next Yao Ming, and he's not the next Yao Ming, and he might be older than he says he is, and all that stuff. And he goes super high. Kwame Brown, Eddy Curry, yeah, these are player types that we've seen work before, but no one's really testing for the part of the game that's super important, which is the read and react part. Because you don't see that when these guys are in a gym dunking a basketball. And that's not what you're testing. So if you test a guy to hit 15 open jumpers and he hits 14, you say he's a good shooter. I say, I don't know what he does in a game because I've never seen it. That's the danger of drafting someone like Shaedon Sharpe so high. It's because you don't know how this guy's going to react against pro competition. You've never seen it. Never seen anything close to it. Let me describe a player. This player averaged 30 points, 25 rebounds, 8 blocks in high school. Okay. He wants to come to the NBA. Okay. I put him in a gym and I have this guy do sprints so that I can see how fast he is. And I'm like, wow, he runs fast. And then I test his vertical jump and I'm like, man, 44-inch vertical. This guy's a beast. Okay. And then I test his body fat percentage, 5.2%. I know he likes to keep his body in shape. That's a good sign. Okay. So, and then I put this guy on my NBA roster and he can't do anything. He keeps turning the ball over, keeps fouling, keeps reading situations late, can't learn the plays. What happened? Well, maybe the things that we're testing for, wingspan, hand size, all these things aren't the most relevant determining factors in whether or not a player is going to be a great player or a good player. In my opinion, the greatest common link between every player who has ever been dominant in the NBA, and you can talk about Michael, Larry, Magic, Kareem, Hakeem, Tim Duncan, Kevin Garnett, go down the list. Every one of those players was a really smart player. And I don't mean smart like book smart. I don't mean like they wrote their thesis on something or that they were astrophysicists. I mean smart, as in they read the game properly. Read, react. Because the reality of the situation is the NBA is a game of physics where there are 10 variables that are constantly in motion, okay, or at least in potential motion at all times for 200 possessions a game. If there's a player or a variable on the court who is just 1 second ahead mentally of the other 9 guys, that guy will more than likely become a superstar. So before we jump to the conclusion that that guy that you really had high hopes for, be it Harry Giles or be it Marvin Bagley or whoever, is a bust who didn't try hard, who didn't want it enough, who got fat and lazy, got paid and just stole money, before we go with that narrative, consider the other side. Maybe they weren't as good as you thought they were because they never really played anyone who would have exposed it. We need to get over this idea of 10,000 hours and 10,000 shots, and quantifying this is not important to me. Quality training. Okay? It is possible, in my opinion, if you have the right coach and you're receptive enough to learn more and grow more in one day with that coach, then you could, in 5 years by yourself in a gym, shooting jump shots. I remember I attended a basketball camp with Kevin O'Neill, who's a former Raptor coach. And man, this guy just like coached defense in a way that I had never seen any of my high school coaches. And I swear to God, I showed up that day at the basketball court and people could not believe how much better I was at defense. I was in that camp for 3 hours with him. 3 hours, and this guy made me a better defender in 3 hours. I could have sat there and done defensive drills all summer and not achieved that 3 hours. I had to know to attend that camp. I had to be open enough to listen to him. He had to be good enough at teaching me the right things. This is why I know that Scottie Barnes will be successful, because he's not just putting in 1,000 shots or 500 shots, or, he's not just hitting the gym. This is what a lot of athletes do because that's what they've always done. What Scottie's done for, I don't know who taught him that he needed to do this, is he's worked with a trainer who really understands his game, his strengths, his weaknesses. And he's worked on one new thing every summer. And if you go back and listen to Tim Grover talk about Michael Jordan, or you listen to Kobe Bryant's trainer talk about him, when you look at any of the all-time greats, they all worked hard, yes, but they worked really smart too. There was like an entire summer where they were working on like catch and release. And there was an entire summer where they were working on footwork in the post. And it was like with a coach who actually understood what the hell they were doing, so they weren't doing it incorrectly the entire time. I think how you work is more important than how hard you work. And I think that's something we need to consider, that a lot of players that we think are busts are just not working smart enough, and they are on teams that don't know how to teach them how to work smart enough. And I think this is why the Raptors have been so successful in general in coaching up players and in developing players, is because whether or not that player knows what they should be doing or not doing, the Raptors know what they should and should not be doing. And I think more teams need to invest in the infrastructure of development instead of just leaving these kids to the wolves and just saying, okay, go to the gym, spend all summer by yourself getting better and show us what you did. Because most athletes, even pro athletes, are probably doing the work. They're just not doing it correctly. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you made it this far, I appreciate it. This has been a little rant on why I think certain players are not successful in the NBA while others are, and obviously why I think Scottie Barnes is going to be so successful and why I hold out such high hopes for him. Let me know in the comments below, is there a player that in the NBA that you are kind of losing patience with, that you had high hopes for? Is there a past player that you had super high expectations for? Are there any Harry Giles or Andrea Bargnani, fans out there that just, had their hearts broken when these players just didn't work out as well as maybe we had hoped that they would? Let me know about that in the comments below. We have applied for the YouTube Partner Program. It's going to take 5 or 6 weeks, maybe longer, for that to start working, but we're going to still make content in the meanwhile, and hopefully this will all be resolved by the time the season starts. So thanks for watching. Peace.